Can Alex Pereira actually beat Israel Adesanya? After both Izzy and Alex won their most recent fights at UFC 276, it seems like the time is finally here where we're gonna get this long-awaited matchup between these two guys. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy MMA, I make opinionative MMA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. But anyways, let's get into it. When Alex Pereira originally got added to the UFC roster, fans around the UFC were all excited to see the potential matchup between Alex and Izzy, after they did fight 2 times prior in kickboxing where Alex won both outings and even got a knockout on Izzy. But after Alex had a really impressive first fight in the UFC, getting a knockout with a flying knee, and also had a win over Bruno Silva, it was pretty clear that the UFC was fast-tracking Alex to a title shot. And in his third fight, they gave him Sean Strickland, who was a top 5 opponent and certainly would be his biggest test yet, but at the same time, out of all the fighters in the top 5, Sean was probably the best matchup for Alex Pereira, as he definitely did have some ability on the ground, but he was more so a striker. And in that matchup between Sean and Alex actually got a very impressive victory, knocking out Sean in the very first round with that check left hook that he's so famous for using. And although a lot of people are criticizing Sean Strickland's game plan going into that matchup, and I definitely do agree with the criticism, it's still nonetheless a very impressive victory for Alex. And at this point, it seems like it's very, very likely that we're gonna get that matchup between Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya next for the title shot. And in my opinion, I think out of anybody in the top 5, maybe even the top 10, I think Alex is probably the most dangerous matchup for Israel Adesanya, and he's probably the best chance Israel Adesanya has to actually losing the belt. And I'm not necessarily saying that he can beat every single fighter in the division in the top 5 or the top 10, because I do think there are bad matchups for Alex in the top 5, specifically Robert Whittaker. But as we all know, styles do make fights, and Alex's style is definitely a very good one in a matchup between him and Izzy. But now let's look at what Alex Pereira does well and why I personally think he's one of the most dangerous matchups for Adesanya. So starting with his stand-up, it's pretty clear that Alex is one of the best strikers in the UFC already due to the fact that he was so good in kickboxing and has a ton of experience in that. But Alex has a phenomenal jab, he has an amazing check left hook, it's probably the best weapon that he does have, and might honestly be one of the best left hooks of all time. The amount of power and how quick he throws that is absolutely incredible, and basically everybody gets knocked out if they get hit with that. The only person who didn't get knocked out by that left hook is Bruno Silva, which kind of tells you the kind of chin that he has, although he definitely did get wobbled by that shot. But Alex also has a pretty nice uppercut, of course he has a right hook as well, he has some nice elbows and close, he has some nice knees, he has really good kicks to the legs, even kicks to the body or even the head at times. Alex also has a pretty good chin, I would say, although it hasn't necessarily been tested all that much in the UFC at the very least, but he has definitely taken some big shots from Israel Adesanya when they were kickboxing and he didn't go down obviously, so I would probably say Alex has a really good chin. But in terms of his takedown defense, although he's relatively new to MMA, I would definitely say he's pretty good at that, mostly due to the amount of strength and power that he does have, but also I would say he has pretty good technique at this point, as he has been training with Glover Teixeira for the past few years, and it definitely has proven to be successful for him. Now once the fight does get taken to the ground, obviously Alex doesn't necessarily have the most experience, although he definitely has been training with Glover, as I said, for the past few years on his ground game. I still at this point wouldn't necessarily say he's good at it, obviously, although we haven't necessarily seen anything from Alex on the ground. But of course Adesanya isn't necessarily all that good on the ground either, but one thing that I will say is I do think Adesanya has a pretty underrated jiu-jitsu game, which could potentially come into play in this matchup. But it's pretty clear that Alex wants to keep the fight on the feet, and when he does so, he's more likely than not going to be successful. But now let's look at what Israel Adesanya does well out there and compare that to Alex Pereira. So it's pretty clear that these two definitely have pretty similar games in the sense that they're both stand-up fighters, but Izzy also has a phenomenal stand-up game as as well, obviously. He has a really nice jab. Of course, he has a really nice uppercut as well. He has a nice hook. He has a nice left and right straight cross. He can switch stances whenever he wants to and does so freely. He also has very, very nice kicks to the legs that he utilizes in every single fight and utilizes it very effectively to break down his opponent, and then eventually moves upstairs with some kicks to the head or just throws some punches to the head as well. He also throws a really nice kick to the body, either a front kick or a side kick. Also has a really nice question mark kick right to the head or just a regular roundhouse kick to the head. Izzy also has pretty nice knees and clothes, some nice elbows as well, in the clinch specifically. And although Izzy hasn't necessarily put up the most entertaining performances as of late, it definitely has shown how dominant he has been based upon the fact that he's able to just dismantle every single one of his opponents and do so relatively easily. And on the feet, it would definitely be a very, very interesting matchup between these two guys, and honestly, I'm not sure who's better. Now, in terms of his takedown defense, he definitely has phenomenal takedown defense, as basically everybody he fought had a lot of trouble taking him to the ground, but obviously Alex Pereira is probably not going to look to do that anyway, so it kind of doesn't matter in this matchup. On the ground, as I said, he has underrated jiu-jitsu, but once again, unless Izzy takes the fight to the ground, the fight is probably not going to be on the ground. But one other thing that I want to mention, obviously, Izzy has a pretty good shin, I would say, but he also has phenomenal head movement, probably the best head movement in the entire UFC, and that definitely would come in handy, especially against a guy like Alex Pereira, who throws everything straight and hard and also has a ton of power. But now let's get into what I personally think would happen in this potential matchup. So obviously, as I mentioned, I do think this matchup is extremely close, and it's going to be very difficult to pick a winner at this point. And the early betting odds for this fight have Israel Adesanya as a slight favorite, which in my opinion, I think I would definitely agree with those odds, as this fight obviously is very close. Now, some of you may be thinking, how is this matchup all that close, considering that Alex Pereira just got to the UFC recently and only has 3 fights under his belt, and when you also consider that Adesanya is not only a champion, but he's been a very dominant champion, how would this fight even be close? But the reason why this matchup is so close is exactly what I said before, in styles do make fights, and this matchup is probably going to be on the feet, and on the feet, Alex Pereira got the best of Israel Adesanya both times they faced in the past. Now, obviously, I do think Adesanya has gotten a lot better ever since those 2 losses to Alex Pereira, but at the same time, Alex also probably has gotten a lot better as well. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this matchup could pan out. But if I had to pick a winner at this point, I would probably have to go with Israel Adesanya, solely based on the fact that he has a lot more experience in the UFC. But at the same time, Alex Pereira has definitely turned into one of my favorite fighters in the UFC, and I definitely could see him taking down Israel Adesanya and actually taking the belt, as crazy as it may sound. And it doesn't necessarily have to go this way, but at this point, I feel like if the fight does go the distance, Adesanya probably would win it, but of course, Alex definitely could win by decision as well, as he is an extremely talented striker. But I think if the fight were to end in a knockout, Alex Pereira probably would win. But of course, as I said, my official prediction for this matchup would be Israel Adesanya by decision. But obviously, we have a ton of time between now and when this fight actually gets announced and when it actually happens, obviously, and a lot could change between these 2 time frames. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Alex Pereira could beat Israel Adesanya, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these 2 videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out, guys.